Welcome to the Obsessed with Real Estate show. I'm your host, Alana George, and I'm obsessed with real estate. I'm so excited you're here. Today I'm interviewing Daniel Nguyen with Nassau Investments. So he has a really cool story about meeting mentors just out of the blue. I'm calling it a Cinderella story because of how it unfolded. And we talk a bit about what's the difference between investing in a multifamily syndication versus a hotel syndication, which isn't something that I've had very much experience with. So it was really cool hearing about the differences there. We talk about the Bentley. So you will have to listen to hear more about that. And this week's mindset tip that I have for you is just keep going. I know that it's really hard. I've been talking to a lot of people that have burnout. We are pulled in so many different directions every day. I know I personally wear a lot of hats in my home life and business and family life, right? I never have just free time. It's not a thing. Always something I could be doing, I should be doing. And with real estate, I feel like it can beat us up, especially if we're not getting results right away. So I want to tell you to just keep going. If you need to take a break, you can, but just power through. I really think that's the difference between real estate investors that are successful and those that are not. The determination to not give up. Things will get hard, things will get boring, but it's the journey and it's the pushing and the passion to just keep going. So that's my tip for you this week. I hope that helps you and maybe you needed to hear it. Let's jump into our conversation with Daniel Nguyen. So I have Daniel Nguyen here with Nassau Investments. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
I'm so grateful to have you here again. So I have to admit that Daniel was my first interview, and while he did a great job, I'm so appreciative of him. We just couldn't edit the episode to make it work. So I'm doing this again, and this is going to air. This is going to be the episode that airs, and I'm so excited that you're willing to come back and give me another chance at interviewing you. So thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome.
Perfect. So let's hop right in. So Daniel and I met on Facebook, actually, weird enough. Yes, through mutual friends. And you were in the realtor world previously, and then you made some connections. So that's kind of how we were connected. We live kind of in the same area. And you had reached out to a friend of mine, actually Jasmine Lee, who was previously on an episode, and she mentioned my name as somebody to connect with. So we had coffee and I loved your story and I felt like it was one worth sharing. So that is what brings us here. Does that sound about right?
That is correct.
Okay, good. Didn't screw that up. So Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what led you to real estate investing?
I think the first thing that led me to real estate investing was the thoughts of, it was actually probably part of my first job out of college. In the first couple of weeks, I had this realization, like, I'm supposed to do this until I'm like 65. Oh, no, not happening. And so I didn't really know how to pursue it. So I just kind of kept the idea on the back burner until I was hanging out with some friends. I was asking them, hey, so what's your living arrangement here? Do you guys rent this house together, this and that? And so he basically said, no. This is my house. And then I know Yada and Dada from high school, and they just rent it from me. And so my first thought was like, oh my God, this is like the most brilliant idea ever. And this was probably back in like 2010 or 2009. And so it was like, I had no idea what house hacking was or whether it even was a term at that point. So then fast forward to 2012, basically just took all my savings, everything I've got, bought a house in Mountain View, and then rented the rest of the rooms to roommates. Some of them were a couple Craigslist, some of my best friends. I think eventually like one of my sister's best friend's twin brothers moved in. So it was a fun group. Everybody our age, and I
sounds like a party.
Yeah, I kept that house for 4 years. I had no bills while I was living there. I was able to save up and actually use some equity and some savings to buy a fourplex while I was living there. And then when I sold it in 2016, so from 2012 to 2016, the value went up by about 650 grand. And so I
Wow.
just kind of I skipped a bunch of things that I was doing while living there. Like I was in mortgage, I flipped homes, I was a recruiter, not in that order. The recruiter was first, but I was kind of thinking about real estate genre
Yeah.
positions, but
So
mortgage.
you've kind of been pulled to the industry in one way or another, it's sounding like, and
Hmm.
then somebody else gave you the inspiration to attempt to house hack.
Hmm.
And now we probably wouldn't find Craigslist tenants or roommates even, but it sounds like
You
it was a
know,
problem for you then, right?
no, it's because it was in Mountain View, and there was
Right.
Google, there was all the tech companies, so there
Yeah,
was a
lots of
lot of
single
lots of
people.
single, more mature kind of post college people are who were kind of actually going into tech, so they're career
Mhm.
oriented. They're not like,
Professionals.
yeah, they're professionals, young professionals. So it made it a lot easier because they were actually respectful.
Yeah, that's good. And Mountain View still has a lot of that going on of house
Hmm.
hacking or renting by the room,
Yeah,
just for all the single engineers to live by work. So that's not
yeah,
that uncommon. And so from
and
there, were able to save up because you knew you didn't want to do the same job forever
mhm,
and buy the fourplex, right?
yeah,
Okay, cool. And then that was non-owner occupied, right? So you
correct. That
got
was not non-owner occupied.
an investor loan on that.
Hmm. It was, well, it
Cool.
was well, it's residential, so it was a residential loan.
Mhm.
But because I probably normally wouldn't qualify, but because actually I actually didn't qualify. It was a kind of it was kind of a big step in Marissa and my relationship because she was a nurse, and so she had the
Mhm.
W-2. I had a lot of write-offs, so I didn't qualify for a whole lot. And so the loan agent, I want to mention her name. Her name is Trisha Law. She's actually kind of pulled off a few things for me over the years. So thank you to her. She was able to get a couple of things. She was able to get the lender to approve a couple of things to qualify as income that they didn't want to at first.
Oh, okay.
And
So
so the
yeah.
75% of the rents added to qualifying income, plus Marissa helping me qualify. And so basically without Marissa, I wouldn't have been able to start.
That's amazing. So having an experienced quality lender in your corner,
Hmm.
it was key to you kicking off really your career because you bought the house hack and that's kind of like almost a baby step sometimes. And then buying that
Yeah.
fourplex really was only possible.
Yeah. And the issue, yeah, the issue was is that because it's the residential loan, like both the house and the fourplex hits your DTI,
Yeah.
your debt to income ratio. So that kind of hurts.
Hmm.
Later on, I sold the fourplex, went to Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hmm.
That was commercial, so the building was very well self debt servicing.
Right.
So I didn't have to
Right.
worry about that with the commercial loans and all
With
that.
the fourplex though, you were at least able to claim the income of the rent coming in as income,
Yes.
right? Was
So the
that
loan,
docked at 75%?
yeah, it was docked at 75% for a vacancy, kind of like safety vacancy for
Yeah.
the bank's guidelines. And then having a girlfriend at the time with a W-2 helped, who was a nurse.
Yeah, that's very stable. And
Yeah.
so that you're right, that is a big step in your relationship.
Yeah, and she actually talked to her dad, and her dad was like, "Are you sure? Like, you got to be
Yeah.
careful because if this goes bad." And she's like, "No, we're really serious."
And
And then girlfriend turned fiance turned wife turned mother of we have
yes,
a son now, so it did turn out well.
amazing. Good. I know. I wouldn't
Yeah,
recommend that for everybody. You have to
yeah,
like really be serious
yeah,
about somebody that's based,
yeah.
I mean, it's a partnership, just like a marriage.
Hmm.
So, yes, I've seen things go south, but I'm so happy that it worked out.
Yeah, me too. I was probably a little bit. We were both probably a little bit naive about the decision when it
Yeah.
was there, but it worked out.
Yes, that's good. I'm trying to think back, like, okay, we weren't married when my husband and I bought this house, but we were getting married the following month. So
Yeah.
it was so close to
Yeah.
being like
Yeah.
fully committed.
Yeah.
But girlfriend, yeah, that's a lot of trust in you. And so that's really
hmm
cool. So tell me about what you learned from that first deal, and then we can talk about your current portfolio and where you went from there.
I was first starting out, and most real estate investors first start out, they're kind of tight on funds. And so I took some, well, not really shortcuts, but I took
Mm,
shortcuts in terms of like using the wrong kind of contractors and handymen to do work in it. And it ended up costing more later to hire the correct person to fix all the problems that the first person didn't do.
yes.
And then, but I was lucky because I was flipping homes with my partner Lana Nguyen at the time. Rich Kwok is the broker, Lana is his wife. And so Rich helped me get the fourplex, and then Lana and I were flipping homes. And so I knew about all the vendors to use for the kitchen remodels and the bathroom remodels and all that. So I remodeled all 4 units of the fourplexes for a pretty affordable price.
That's really cool that you were able
hmm
to pull on that. I feel like the lesson of hiring the cheap contractors
Yeah.
is like one that, we hear over and over again. And also I personally get beat over the head with over and over again. So with my
Yeah.
first rental, I did the same. I hired the cheapest and then ended up having to pay more
hmm
to, fix the mistakes slash finish what wasn't finished. And then more recently, I hired the cheaper option because all of the contractors have been so booked up that I couldn't wait 2.5 to
mm
3 months on
Yeah.
my project to get
Yeah.
a quality person in. So I thought I'll just hire tradesmen and subs and handymen. It took so long organizing all these
hmm
people and people not showing up, and because they just weren't the quality business contractors that I should have been hiring in the amount of time it's taken me to do this remodel that I'm currently working on. I could have
hmm
just waited and just let the unit be vacant and have hired the contractor from the first go. But
Yeah.
anyways, very valuable lesson
hmm
for our listeners is to always you get what you pay for big time when it
hmm
comes to remodels, and it's not something that you want to skimp on, right?
hmm
Yeah. So tell me about where your current portfolio is now, where you went from that fourplex, because you mentioned Cincinnati. So how did you get there and what are you doing now?
I got to Cincinnati. My roommate in college, his parents live right on the border of Indiana and Ohio. So
Mhm.
basically, about 20 minutes or so away from the Ohio River, which separates, which separates kind of like Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana. And so
I've got a map right here.
so his dad was the director of like food and beverage for the Cincinnati elementary school system. So he kind of knew the city. So he pointed me to different neighborhoods to look at. And so I wanted to go out of state for the cash flow.
Mm,
And so my first thought was like, I'm going to sell the fourplex. I'm going to buy probably like 20, maybe 20 units in cash, no mortgage, like 10 grand a month net. And then that'll be fine. I'll be comfortable and I can just do my own thing elsewhere, get a property manager. And then, so I went over there, took a look at a bunch of properties. And well, I first called all the listing agents. One guy got back to me. His name was Dustin Crumpack. He was a realtor over there. And we hit it off. I flew in. My same friend had a bachelor party at his parents' house. His parents have a lake house. And I flew into Cincinnati a week early. Dustin picked me up and he took me to all these properties, and I didn't like a few of them. And then not only did I not like a few of them, but in his mind, he kind of thought ahead and said, okay, this guy's from California. I should probably find him more stuff because his fund to buy is going to basically, he's going to need more things to look at.
mhm.
So he called a few people, and my current partners actually were one of the ones that responded to him. And then so they had a few buildings to show, They picked me up a couple days later, took me to a couple different properties, and then I ended up purchasing a 28 unit building from them. And
Wow.
then we hit it off. We hung out almost every day between that day and the time I went back to my friend's parents' house for the bachelor party. And then we just kind of kept in touch and we started doing some deals together.
A
So far,
bromance evolved is what I'm
yeah, it was a three-way bromance.
hearing.
It was Nate Barger, Mike Ely, and myself. And then
Cool.
so I remember Nate's wife was like, okay, well, I had to deal with Mike for all this time, and now you're in the picture too.
So
So
I want to stop you right here.
okay.
So you went to Cincinnati seeking
Hmm.
cash flow. Did you already have in your mind that you wanted to quit your main job or quit flipping, or what was the point of wanting to change your strategy a little bit to increase the cash flow?
I just wanted to get cash flows to make my life easier, be more financially independent. I didn't really think about quitting until I actually received the cash flow and it was more than I originally thought. And so I quit. I was doing the realtor lender thing at the time. And then I was like, okay, as soon as I got my first rent check, I was like, I'm
I'm done.
okay. I'm done.
I love that. So financial independence. I mean, that's reason enough.
Yeah,
And
I've never been one to value myself based on a title or a production number as they go into real estate. I really don't care about being well known for being the VP of this or VP of that. Like, I have one life to live. I'm not going to spend it slaving away for a company or for anything other than my own quality of life. That's
right.
why we work to improve our quality of life, not as a quality of life to advance in this kind of superficial. I mean,
Yeah.
that it's not for me.
I get that people do have different goals, and sometimes
Hmm.
working in a corporate setting gives a clear ladder to climb, and
Hmm.
that's what's comfortable
Hmm.
instead of the risk of going off on your own to create a life that is more by your design. It's
Hmm.
sometimes easier to live a life designed
Hmm.
by default or by somebody else. And,
Hmm.
I can appreciate that the world does need all different types of people.
Hmm.
But I see what you're saying. And I think that a lot of our listeners are listening to this because they probably agree with you of wanting
Hmm.
more financial independence to focus on the things that we want to focus on. Like
Yeah.
for you, I know your son Reese is a huge part of your life.
Hmm.
So getting the opportunity to spend more time with him and with your family, like that's
Hmm.
huge. That's
Yeah.
priceless.
Yeah. I'm not a old cell phone plan father, meaning nights and weekends.
I've never heard that before. Cell phone plan father, nights and weekends. Oh my gosh.
The old school, like, oh, I'm running out of minutes.
Yeah, that is a very good throwback. If anybody's listening and they don't know what we're talking about, you only had so many day minutes. And then you had to, like, if you ran out, you had to wait till after a certain time when it wasn't peak hours to call somebody back, right?
Can I call you back after 7?
I like forgot that existed.
It was like a plan would have 300 anytime minutes and like 1,000 night and weekend minutes. But if you have the top plan, it was like 500 day minutes and unlimited night and weekends.
What is this limit on
Yeah.
minutes? Like that doesn't even exist anymore. It's so
Yeah.
funny.
So you just play Snake on your phone
Yeah,
until the nighttime.
for sure. Yeah. Listen to the radio. Try to record your favorite song right when
Yeah.
it starts.
Back when a pound sign was still just a pound sign.
Just a pound sign. That is so funny. And geez, that was even, I want to say before text messages too, because I was going to
Mhm.
mention T9. I just got my dad, speaking of dads and phones, I just got him a new flip phone because we got him an iPhone. And that
Mm.
was a terrible idea. That was so bad. It broke so fast. He was deleting apps. Like he didn't know what was going on. So we got him a flip phone. And I'm trying to input because you can't put there's no like cloud way to put his iPhone stuff into to go back in time into a flip phone. So I'm like
Yeah.
putting in his contacts for him, and it's T9, and the typing where I have to push like 2 2 2 3 3
Yeah,
3. Like,
so I got back into that because my Android watch has T9.
oh,
Yeah, so if I'm
interesting.
away from my phone and I get a text message on my watch, I can actually type it out, but it's T9. So I was like, oh man, I have to refresh my
Yeah,
brain.
throwback. Oh my gosh. That now you think that it's hard to like, this is really terrible. Do not text and drive. You shouldn't even be watching this. You can listen to this while driving, but do not text and drive. But before like it came out, how bad texting and driving was, right? It was a pretty common thing to do. And I remember texting and on T9, and you can't
Hmm.
look, you just have to know that when you push, the number 7 4 times, that's going to be S.
Yeah.
And it like before
Did you
predictive
just make
text,
that, did you just make that up or did you actually remember that?
I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I think TUV is, I don't know. I have to like look it up. I'll put in the show notes.
Somebody was texting way too much.
Okay, moving on. So
Yes.
you
So I wanted
finished.
to be, so I'm a full-time, both Marissa and I are almost full-time. Marissa works Saturday, Sunday. She's off Monday through Friday. But Monday through Friday, we're basically full-time parents.
That's amazing. And you get to
Hmm.
do that because now you said you met your partners, and in Cincinnati, you became,
Hmm.
BFFs, a
Yeah.
three-way love triangle of
Yeah.
bromance. And so you've been doing deals together. And is that mostly in the Cincinnati area, or is that throughout the
So our,
US?
our multifamily is in Cincinnati. We just wrapped up a 9-unit that's been taking forever because it was in such bad shape and it was historical, so permitting and all that. We have a 30-unit, a commercial warehouse, and then we have hotels that are kind of spread out all over. We have a one in Oklahoma City. We have one in Ohio, but up in Columbus, right next to Ohio State University. And then we have two in Indiana, and then currently a development in Sarasota, Florida.
Oh, wow. Yes. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a long list to rattle off. So some of the things that caught my attention, it sounds like you're doing mostly multifamily, and a
Mhm.
9-unit. I mean, that's kind of small on the scale on commercial
Yeah, it really is.
building.
It's just the location of that 9-unit is pretty. It's very, very prime location. So I think back in like the early 2000s, there's this area in Cincinnati called Over the Rhine. It was like one of the top murder capitals in either the state or the country. And then the
Not what I thought you
city,
were going to say.
yeah, so the city decided to pour like 450 million into that area.
Oh my God.
And so when I first met Nate and Mike, it was already like really nice. It was like you would see millennials driving their BMWs, Mercedes, Lexus in their fried. It went from murder capital to being able to find paella at a Spanish restaurant there. Like that's like a
Is
lot of
that
things.
gentrified? Is that the definition of that?
Yeah, like when you have paella,
I
it's
love
like
paella.
yeah. If you can find paella in the middle of the Midwest in a
Oh, that's
downtown,
funny.
then it's the definition of. And so
Yeah,
there's like
it's
millennials in suits
arrived.
getting up. Yeah. And then but the interesting thing is that you go down the strip, and then once you get to the end of the strip, there would be a kind of construction work going of like 3 buildings. And if you walk past the construction, it's like ghetto. So
Hmm.
there was this clear divide that was the construction zone of like 3 buildings on each side. And then as I visited over the years, I would go back like 3 times a year, and then slowly the strip would get longer and the construction would kind of move. And so we purchased this building. When we purchased it, it was on the other side of construction zone. We purchased the building for, I think, 450,000 for the 9-unit. It was just like, I mean, it was abandoned. It was pretty bad, but it was right on. There's like this historic cable car that goes by, and this building is like right on the cable car tracks, or right on the
What price did you pay? I'm sorry.
450.
450. Okay.
Yeah.
So 450, it was on the path of progress
Yeah.
or the path of paella,
Hmm.
as we
Yeah.
discussed. But it was abandoned, but in a great location. Okay. I mean, and then you went in and renovated it, it sounds
Hmm.
like.
Yeah, we renovated it, and then now it's kind of fully occupied. It's getting occupied. We just finished it up kind of a few months ago, and then it's getting occupied. The rents are great. It's like, I think we projected like like 950 to 1,000, and then I think the rents actually came in at like 1,200 or 1,250 or something like that.
Great. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
rents just have skyrocketed over the past few years. I want to
Hmm.
dive into a couple different things. One being your team dynamic. So it sounds like you're bringing to the group financial benefits, right? Can you tell me a little bit about like what each team member is responsible for and how you operate so smoothly to be able to acquire so many assets?
So it's actually mostly Nate and Mike who allow all this to happen. When I first joined them, they were already running for 20 years or 15,
Mm.
20 years. And so they had their investors, they had everything. Nate owns his own construction company. He has contractors on salary. Mike basically has his plug to the ground. And he's also he retired from this position now, but there's a neighborhood in Cincinnati called Coreyville, and that's the neighborhood basically where Cincinnati University is. And Mike was actually the city council president for
Oh, wow.
Coreyville, and so he has like political connections. And so I came in, I raised money, or in the 9 unit case, I invested a lot of my own money into that.
Yeah.
The 30 unit I raised money and got equity. And then, so the 30 unit is basically Nate, Mike, and myself, and same with the 9 unit. There was a commercial warehouse that we did, and we bought it for very low price. So we fixed it up a little bit. We sold 40% equity to a bigger investment group. And so we were basically in it free and clear.
Wow,
Um,
that's really cool. That's a cool structure. I also want to circle back to hotels because you mentioned
mhm,
hotels. And when we first met, we kind of had talked a little bit about that. I feel like, hotels versus a multifamily apartment building, there's a lot of
mhm.
similarities, and I can see why there would be crossover. But,
Yeah.
what kind of differences and why would somebody get into hotels instead of just sticking to multifamily?
It's a different industry that performs differently. Hotels are easier to scale.
Mm.
The cash flow that you're running is a lot higher. So it's easier per square footage
Mhm.
to maintain because, for example, our Courtyard Marriott is about the same square footage as my 28 unit building, but it makes about 10 times more per month. So it
Oh my
grosses about
gosh.
250,000 as opposed to like 25,000. And so and then also hotels is going to be, the scale is a lot higher. So you get property management companies
Mhm.
that most of the time you're going to want to get property management with apartments you can probably manage by yourself. But most of the hotel management companies are going to be, because they're so scaled and so big, they require a lot more kind of manpower. So a
Mhm.
lot of them are actually corporations where they're kind of perpetual entities, meaning there's the CEO, president, vice president, and they're constantly grooming the next CEO, president, vice president. It's not a mom and pop shop where, for example, Nate and Mike own about 1,500 apartment units together and they have their own property management company. But if Nate's son or daughter doesn't want to take over, then that's the end of the company once
Right.
Nate kind of decides to call it quits and retire. So with that being said, the hotels are good for generational wealth because you have these entities that can just kind of watch the hotels and manage the hotels almost perpetually.
Right. So if they have a bit more of a more professional management system
Hmm.
in place as
Yeah,
opposed to apartments, which can be one-offs, mom and pops, come and
yeah.
go. And that's very interesting to me. It sounds like the benefits are easier to scale, cash flow, less intensive for you.
Mhm.
But I mean, have to imagine there's a lot more overhead with
There
that
is a lot,
management,
yeah, there is a
right?
lot more overhead, not significantly, because a lot of the things like they don't have kitchens, they don't have
Mhm.
different things that the apartments do, and and imagine a lot of people go into apartments to get into the short term. They want to get to the short term rentals because it's more lucrative because people pay a lot more per night, and that's
Right.
kind of how the hotels make the money that the apartments don't.
Yeah. Hotels are like, hey, we've been doing short-term rentals this whole time and it's been
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Everybody else, all these investors hopping in are late to the game.
yeah. And so and plus the main draw, so that was the main draw, and plus the scalability, because when you buy a hotel, it's a bigger kind of asset. And so scaling a $1 billion apartment portfolio is a lot harder than scaling a $1 billion hotel portfolio, which is kind of our overall like distant goal, is to have $1 billion portfolio.
I love that. Dream big.
Hmm.
Go for it. I love it. So, got a lot of my questions out. I want to move on to what are your current challenges at this state of your investing career?
I think a lot of it. So there's two challenges right now, like two very specific ones. One of them is raising money for the hotels, and it's kind of like in Shark Tank when somebody comes out with a new product and they're saying, well, this is not just a product. You have to educate the general public about this product before it can go big. And that's the problem with the hotels, is because when somebody not in the real estate investing world thinks about real estate investing, the first thing they think about, or the first thing most people do, is they look around their own neighborhood and they buy a second house and they rent it out, which is perfectly fine, though not nearly as lucrative as buying multifamily, because most of the time when you do that, you're under the thought, you're kind of stuck in the thought of, I'm going to retire when I'm 65, which means when you buy those single family houses, you're going to be either in the hole or break even every month until you pay off the mortgage or refinance to lower, like 10 years later, to lower the payment so they can cash flow just a little bit. A lot of people say, oh, but my house is appreciating. Like, that's only really kind of relevant in specific areas of the country. Like, a lot of areas of the country, houses don't really appreciate. And
Right.
so that's perfectly fine and well. And then they dive a little bit deeper and say, okay, I really want to get more involved in investing in real estate. The next logical step is apartments. And almost like a very small amount of people say, I want to get into hotels. And so there's that, you have to do that educating process before. So there's a certain amount of lead time when you talk to a potential investor. 99% of the time they say, oh, I was interested about hotels because I heard Nate or I heard Mike on the podcast. I just don't know anything about it. And so we kind of have to educate, let it marinate. And what takes longer is the investor mental acceptance of not going into
Yes.
apartments. I mean, obviously they have the capability of investing the next day. It's just the
The education, the wrapping your head around. I think you're
Mhm,
right when you're already looking at investing in syndications and
mhm,
you might be looking at multifamily, which is a little bit more common. There's also like people do like shopping malls and strips and that commercial realm that I've heard syndications for, but like switching gears to go into hotels, it's a bit more unknown and it's also not as common in my
mhm.
opinion. I don't talk to as many syndicators who are raising funds and operating hotels as I do multifamily, right? So it's a little bit easier, I think, to grasp, moving from, like you said, moving from the idea of just buying a single family and renting it out. And then the next logical step would be multifamily. And then hotel, it could be the next logical step that not everybody makes. So you're right. Your job as an educator to raise the funds would be really difficult.
Yeah, and there's a reason for it being difficult, because number one, I mean, the cheapest hotel you're going to get is $8-9 million, and
Wow.
so a lot of times people aren't going to have the volume of capital to get into a hotel. But on top of that, it's a lot of the hotels, it's kind of like, I forgot whether it was Coke or Pepsi. The CEO was saying, I would rather every single one of our factories burn to the ground than our brand. And with that being said, a lot of the big brands, which we concentrate on for a few different reasons. One is disposition. When you concentrate on the Hilton, the Marriott, IHG, the bigger brands, it's easier to unload because people buy brand names for a reason. And on top of that, the REITs also concentrate on the bigger brands. So that's always another avenue you can dispose of the asset that's different, that you don't have access to when you're a mom and pop's kind of motel.
So I want to pause you just for a second. When you say unload or dispose, you really mean sell.
Sell, yes.
Okay, just double checking. I want to make sure the listeners are following along, because that's a little bit more of like commercial jargon.
Yeah.
Right? To unload a property or to dispose of, which sounds to me terrible. It sounds like you're like throwing it away.
For the record, I do not mean throw it in the trash, compost, or recycling bin.
Yeah. Okay, just checking. And then you're saying one of the ways to unload one of these properties, get out of it, sell it, is to sell to a REIT, right? Which is a real estate investment trust that buys a bunch of real estate, and then you can buy shares of it publicly traded, like on the stock market.
Yeah.
Right? Am I saying that correct?
And then, so going back to the original point was concentrating on the big brands. They don't give franchises to people without experience. And just like when you start off in syndication, you want to get somebody with a track record, or start off in anything, you want to become like an apprentice contractor or apprentice electrician, or getting experience, somebody with a track record, with a GP with you, giving them a lot of equity on your first deal. We were the same way. We partnered up with Commonwealth Hotels out of Kentucky. They're a very big kind of property management company with a lot of experience. And so because we were partnered with them, we were able to get the Marriott flag or the Hilton flag, or
right. And you're saying these brand names are trusting to sell to you because you are going to have the experience to keep it up and maintain it and keep the brand's worthiness intact, right? So they're not just selling to everybody. So that really eliminates, and narrows down the buyer pool even more. So that makes it more competitive, or I guess less competitive, harder to get into, higher bar of entry to get into hotels at all. So that goes to the point of why I don't know as many hotel syndicators. It just that's why. That's probably why. So that's really interesting. I love that. And it's really smart for you to have taken that route. So thanks for sharing those current challenges. I want to hear, and you have a lot to be proud of. You have a lot to be proud of, moving so fast through residential straight into commercial, and then going to hotels, which sounds like cream of the crop, very expensive real estate, lots of money to be made, very intimidating for some people to go that big, that fast. On a different note, real estate related or not, what is something that you're really proud of? What's a brag that you can toot your own horn about right now that you feel comfortable sharing with me and the listeners?
I don't know if I feel comfortable sharing, but I will.
Okay. Even if you're uncomfortable, just share it.
Yeah, I personally don't like to be in the spotlight a lot of times. I do for my personality. Like if I go to like a get together, I'll crack jokes and people know who I am by the end of the get together, and it'll be fun. But in terms of material things, I don't really like to put stuff out there. Although since I've been peer pressured by Alana.
That's me.
So when I remember when I first met Nate, he was very well to do. He had a Porsche Boxster. He had a bunch of cars. He's a car guy. And then he calls me up one day and he's like, dude, I think I'm going to buy this Bentley. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then he actually let me drive it to visit my friend Matt, the one that recommended me going to Cincinnati. So I drove it to meet Matt. Matt sat me and he was like, oh my God, this is nice and everything. I was like, man, this would be like amazing if I can get one. And I think it took me about 4 years to mentally, like, I think I had the money to do it. It's just so a lot of my friends, or I had a conversation with a friend, and he was just like, and he's the same as me. He's a real estate investor, and although he drives a Saturn, so
Okay. Millionaire next door status.
yeah,
Very
exactly.
humble.
And then
Okay.
we had a conversation about it. It's like, if you can afford it, go for it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. So I pulled the trigger, and I found a good one, a nice one. I got a really good trade in value for mine because it was the pandemic for my car. And Bentleys
Yeah.
didn't really go up in price that much because they're not kind of everyday,
Yeah.
like, in
Mhm.
demand cars like Honda Accords or Toyota
Mhm.
Camrys or whatnot. And so
Mhm.
I thought to myself, oh, the gap isn't never going to be bridged as much as it will be right now. So I pulled the trigger, and I got the Bentley.
So exciting.
Yeah.
I've never been inside of a Bentley before. I've seen them on TV. So if I'm in your hood, I'm gonna hit you up and be
Oh,
like,
of
"Hey, show
course.
me your Bentley. I want to
Of
see this
course.
greatness." That's really cool though. And I agree with your friend. If you could afford it and it makes you happy, like cars are weird like that because they basically all do the same thing. They get you from
Mhm.
A to B, but it's kind of, what you're comfortable with and what makes you happy. Like,
Yeah. Though I have to say, Marissa was the same way. She was like, "Oh, I would never need a Mercedes. I would never, and I would never do this. I would never do that. It's just a waste of money." And not that she would never go back if she had to, but we got her a Mercedes, and she was like, "Okay, now I get it." I was
that's
like,
so
just
funny. I 100% agree. I drove a BMW for a bit when I got my real estate license. I had the beater car, and then I got some success. And so my husband's actually working for BMW and the
mhm,
motorcycle dealership at the time. So I was like, well, I get a discount. Look at me.
mhm,
I'm a flashy realtor. So I got a super cute white 3 Series
mhm,
BMW, and oh my goodness, that is the ultimate driving machine. And I've had cars since, and I always think back to this BMW that
mhm,
basically ruined it for me. I haven't gone back to a BMW yet, but let
mhm.
me tell you, I think about that BMW all the time.
Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mhm.
Switching back to real estate, if there's somebody's inspired, they're listening to your story, what kind of steps, like tangible steps, would you recommend to somebody who wants to get to where you are?
I would say, if you want to get to where I am quickly, there's my partners Nate and Mike have been talking about other people's money. So whether it be investors, whether it be the bank, basically not money out of your own pocket, and a lot of people call that leverage, which means
Mhm.
you're you're only using 20-25% of your own money to acquire 100% of a property in your name. So my partner Nate basically has a podcast called How to Become a Millionaire in 5 Years with Real Estate. And
Okay, I'm
or
going
I
to
don't know if
write
it's a
that.
podcast, but he's on Facebook Live, and he interviews people.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is basically building your credibility and raising money to buy bigger multifamily, because the bigger you go, the more hands off you have to be.
Mhm.
Because the bigger you go and the more scaled you are, the easier it is, and the more beneficial it is kind of financially to have property management and have a third party taking care of a lot of the busy work while you concentrate on raising more funds for the next deal.
Mhm.
And so I would say, if so, for a beginner, my partner Mike has a mastermind that basically helps you get started in partnering up with a somebody, aka him, and or Nate being in the GP to give you a track record so that you can start syndicating. And then once you do a couple deals with them,
Mhm.
you have the kind of background and the success track record to then go out on your own. So that's probably, if you are willing, not that's not for everybody, but if you are
Mhm.
willing to, then that's probably the best way to go if you want to scale and get to kind of financially secure status faster.
Yeah, that's a really cool program it sounds like. Where could somebody find more information about that?
You can email me, just Daniel at nassauinvests.com. Nassau is basically the city in the Bahamas. NASSAUINVESTS.com. So just Daniel at nassauinvest.com. And then I can connect you to the right people.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think that, mentorship and taking somebody on or being someone's mentee under their wing is such a great way to go in any industry, and especially real estate. I know with commercial, like banks won't even lend to you unless you have a track record. So a lot of times it's not even possible.
Yeah. I actually had difficulty getting a refinance, even though I do have a track record, just because I was an out-of-state investor and it was myself. But I think having Nate and Mike's property management company, their controller, she helped. She was kind of like, I think the image of her sending all my the property management controller sending all my documents to the bank kind of made it look a lot better.
Yeah, you looked a little bit more professional.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have any book recommendations or podcast recommendations that you can give our listeners?
I don't read too much, but I do recommend. So my partner Nate goes live a lot on Facebook. You can look him up, Nate Barger, Barger. He goes live a lot on his renovations, on his just dropping kind of tidbits of information and knowledge. I learned a lot from them just in conversation and hanging out. But he does that. How to Become a Millionaire in 5 Years in Real Estate podcast or Facebook Live show, or it is. My partner Mike has a podcast or a Facebook Live / podcast every Thursday mornings. That one's more it's more kind of like social, and they have guests who chat and throw out information, that sort of thing. But those two, I think they're both free, and they provide a lot of good information.
Cool. I'll try to include those in our show notes. For anyone listening, you can, hop online, take a look at our show notes and get a link directly to that. So tell me about something you're currently obsessed with.
Current obsessions, trying to get back into golf. There's always multiple things that I'm obsessed with. I'm right now almost 9 months removed from the torn Achilles surgery. So I'm trying to ramp back into golf. It'll be a little bit before I get back into tennis, where the activity that I actually tore my Achilles on.
Ouch.
But
oh my gosh.
There's that. And then I am currently also learning as much as I can about a new industry that I want to get into, which I'm closing on the sale of my 28-unit building. And I wanted to explore making a transition into self-storage. So currently doing my research on that industry and just kind of browsing for deals.
Would you say that that's what's next for you?
I think it might be. I always have a portfolio separate from Nate and Mike, and I've dabbled into combining the two, but I think the best way to go about is probably diversify. So they're not involved in self-storage at all. So I decided maybe kind of venture into that because I have multifamily in partnership with them.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. There's so many appealing benefits of self-storage. That's kind of one of those shiny things that I'm trying to stay away from because it's also very appealing, but I'm trying not to deviate too much because I can't invest in everything. So in the future, and I applaud you if you go down that route, and I'll be interested to see how that adventure goes. So Daniel, where can our listeners, viewers connect with you, follow you and your progress, and maybe even discuss partnering up on any of these future deals you have going, maybe the hotel deals or whatnot?
Yes, that email, daniel@nassauinvests.com, is always a good place to reach me. I'm currently just working on the hotels. So if anybody wants to contact me about chatting about hotel investing or just chatting about real estate in general, or if you're interested in talking hotels, just contact me at that email address I mentioned before at daniel@nassauinvests.com.
And I'll stick that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on again. I really appreciate your time. This was so insightful talking about, your journey as well as hotels versus multifamily. We covered a lot, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Alana.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. That is it. That was our interview with Daniel Nguyen with Nassau Investments. And I'm so honored to talk to him. And I'm so honored that you are here listening. If you'd like to connect more, if you'd like to be a guest on the show or give me some feedback, feel free to connect with me at our website, obsessedwithrealestateshow.com. If you'd like to invest with me and explore that as an option, please visit clearconnectioncapital.com. If you liked what you heard today and you are feeling very generous, remember it's good karma. What goes around comes around. Please leave me a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. It will greatly help me impact more people and get on their radar. Thank you for listening. Feel free to subscribe. I recommend it. That way you're never missing an episode. Have a great week.